My name is Ella, and I'm 20 years old. This happened just this past summer, when I returned home from college in California. It wasn't planned. The decision to come back was impulsive, one of those late-night choices that feel heavy and light at the same time. I hadn't told anyone. The idea of surprising my parents gave me this flutter of excitement. Like I was 10 again with a secret too big to keep, dragging my suitcase across the quiet streets of my small Midwestern hometown. I felt something soft settle inside me. Familiarity, maybe? Or the comfort of being seen without having to explain who you are. I opened the front door, expecting the warmth of startled hugs and happy chaos. But the house was still empty. Disappointment tugged at me, until Ella. A voice from the hallway. I turned and there was Max, my little brother. Though little didn't quite apply anymore. He had just turned 18, but in the few months I'd been away, he'd changed. Taller, his voice deeper. The same bright grin, but his eyes sharper. "Quieter, Max," I said, dropping my bags as he pulled me into a hug. It was easy, effortless. But even as we pulled apart, I noticed the shift not in him exactly, but in how I saw him. When he left, I stood in the center of the silent living room, exhaling deeply. The house held that particular kind of stillness that only comes when you've been gone too long. I made my way to the shower. The hot water rushed over me like a promise, washing off weeks of exhaustion, crowded buses, delayed trains, deadlines that refused to wait. When I stepped out, it was like peeling off another layer of tension I hadn't realized I was carrying. I changed into something simple, soft, comfortable, barefoot. I walked to my room and pushed open the door. It smelled like memory. My old posters still clung to the walls. My bed was neatly made, the sheets still patterned with the stars I used to stare at during long study nights. It was like meeting a version of myself I'd left behind. And yet, as I lay back on the bed, a quiet ache whispered through me. College had been loud, fast, demanding, but underneath all the chaos had been a hollowness, a disconnect. Relationships, fleeting conversations, and Fido, LuvReal. Everything felt like it was moving too fast to hold on to. Lying there in my childhood room, I found myself wondering what had I missed while I was gone. Not just moments, but people. Connections. I picked up my phone and began scrolling, not looking for anything in particular, just filling the silence. But my mind drifted, fingers slowing. A gentle hum filled my chest. That need to feel human again. Not overwhelmed or overworked or racing to a deadline, just present. I let myself sink into the softness of the moment. And then a knock at the door. "Ella," Max's voice. I sat up quickly, smoothing my dress. "Come in." The door creaked open. He stood there for a moment, hovering like he wasn't sure he should be there. "Everything okay?" I asked. He nodded, but his posture said otherwise. He crossed the room slowly, sitting on the edge of the bed, running a hand through his hair. There was something in the way he moved, hesitant but full, like he was carrying more than he knew how to share. And then he did. Not all at once, not clearly, but piece by piece. It's like letting go of stones he'd held for too long. He told me about his girlfriend. I'd heard of her, seen glimpses on social media. Assumed they were happy in the vague way you assume young love is always simple. But it wasn't. There were fights, not always loud ones. Sometimes it was the quiet disconnection that wore at him, feeling like he was never enough. That no matter how he tried, it wasn't working. He didn't know if he still loved her, or if he just loved who she used to be to him. I listened, not as the sister who used to tease him, but as someone who remembered that ache. The one that lives in your chest when something you wanted to work begins to fray. He looked older somehow, not just in his face, but in his grief. And in that moment, I saw him clearly for the first time in years, not as my little brother, but as a person, complicated, earnest, flawed. There was a kind of quiet between us, not awkward, but sacred. Like we both knew we were crossing into new territory. "I think about ending it," he said finally, "but I don't know how or if I can." I reached for his hand without thinking, just placed my fingers gently over his. "You don't have to figure it all out tonight. I said. He looked at me, eyes tired. But there was a flicker of something, relief, maybe? Or just the simple comfort of being heard. We sat like that for a long time. No more words. No need for them. And for the first time in a while, I didn't feel so far from home. I gave him a reassuring hug, offering the comfort I knew he needed. It was not merely a hug born of courtesy or routine. It was real, a way of saying, without words, that I understood that I was there for him. As we sat there, my arms around him, something shifted. In the air, I don't. Now, if it was the way he relaxed into or the warmth of his presence, but suddenly, I was hyper-aware of him, of the way his hair brushed against my cheek, of the faint scent of his cologne, of the way his breathing slowed as he come out. I hesitated for a moment, then softly asked, "Is this okay?" It was soft under my fingers, and I found myself tracing the line of his jaw, then down to his neck. It was an innocent gesture, but it felt charged. His body seemed tumult further beneath. My touch leaning into it just a fraction more, my thoughts were a whirlwind caught in a struggle between my current actions and the path I ought to pursue. Uncertainty lingered within me, a question echoing in thurips of my mind. Why did I persist? Refusing to retreat? Perhaps it was the manner in which he anchored my spirit. Perhaps it was merely the surge of feelings that accompanied the moment. No matter what it was, I found myself unable to halt my actions. It's as if the choice slipped from my grasp, leaving me with no recollection of the moment I committed to it. Yet there came a moment when he grasped his hand, guiding it gently to rest upon my leg. It was a spontaneous decision, a decision made in the fleeting moment before doubt can take hold. In that instant, I sensed him stiffen, unmistakably toned by surprise. Yet his hand found its resting place exactly where I had positioned it. His hesitation was palpable, yet beneath it lay a spark of curiosity. His hand radiated warmth. His touch hesitant initially, as if he were caught in a delicate balance between urge to advance and the instinct to remain motionless. Gently, he started toe guide, his fingers in delicate circles along my thigh, ascending with each tender sweep. My heart raced within my chest, and I sensed the warmth surging beneath my skin. Uncertainty loomed over me, yet I found myself unable to halt its course. Every nerve in my body tingled with heightened awareness, reacting to his touch in a manner I hadn't experienced in ages. We lingered in that time, stretching endlessly around us. His hand glided softly, discovering ASI. Nestled against him, me face tucked into the curve of his neck, my body seemed to have a mind of its own, shifting and arching under his touch, reacting to every movement he made. And then, just as the moment felt like it couldn't get any more intense, the sound of the front door opening shattered the quiet. I jumped back so fast it was like I'd been burned, pulling away from Hyman, adjusting my dress in record time. My heart was still racing, but now it was from panic. Max looked just as flustered as I felt. His face red as he quickly scooted back, putting distance between us. I barely had time to catch my breath. My parents called out, their voices carrying through the house. They sounded excited, worried, and relieved. Ulat. Once I forced myself to get up and go greet them, my mind still spinning from what had just happened. They hugged me tight, asking a million questions about why I hadn't warned them I was coming, and mumbled something about wanting to surprise them, trying to act as normal as possible. But even as we sat down for dinner, laughing and catching up, my mind kept drifting back to that moment in my room. I couldn't stop thinking about the way Max's touch had felt, the way my body had responded. Was he thinking about it? To the rest of the evening passed in a blur. I went through the motions, talking, lowing, catching up, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. My thoughts kept circling back to what had happened with Max. The memory of it stayed with me. Warmth of his hand, the way my body had reacted, the electricity in the air between us was also fresh, so vivid that I couldn't shake it, no matter how hard I tried. Even after I went to bed that night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, my thoughts running wild, replaying everything over and over again. Way he gazed at me just before we separated, the gentle caress of his hand sensation, Of being so near to him, the weight of it all was overwhelming, difficult to comprehend what thoughts so occupied his mind. Did it rattle him as deeply as it did me? The following day proved to be even more challenging, encountering Max throughout the house, brushing past him in the hallway. A peculiar tension hung in the air between us. It wasn't precisely uncomfortable, yet it held an air of distinctiveness. We were both conscious of the events that had transpired, yet we found ourselves at a loss for how to address it, uncertain of how to navigate our interactions. I sours in this new reality. I found myself stealing furtive glances at him, observing the subtle details that had previously escaped my notice, the tension in his jawline as he delved into contemplation, the gentle cascade of hair across his forehead, the fluidity of his movements each time our paths intertwined. My heart raced just a bit faster, and I couldn't help but analyze every moment we shared. Did he perceive the way I gazed at him? Did he sense the same allure that captivated me, or was Hedgeos trying to forget it? Trying to move on like nothing had happened, I tried to distract myself, but nothing seemed to work. My parents were busy with their own things for most of the day, leaving me with too much time to think. I kept reviving the moment in my room, imagining all the ways it could have gone differently. What if the door hadn't opened? When it did, what if we hadn't stopped? The questions were endless, and the only made me more restless. That evening, my dad came into the living room where I was sitting scrolling aimlessly in my phone. He apologized, saying he and my mom had to go out for the night to take care of some errands. He felt bad about leaving me alone, especially since I'd just gotten back, but I waved it off, telling him it was fine as soon as they left. The house, it felt eerily quiet. It was just me and Max, and the silence seemed to amplify every little noise. I tried to focus on something, reading, watching TV, but my thoughts kept drifting. The stillness only made it worse, giving my mind free rein. Townder back to the way his hand had felt on my leg, the way I'd felt when we were that close. I don't know when the idea first formed in my head, but once it was there, it was impossible to ignore. It tried to talk myself out of it, tried to reason with myself, but the pull was too strong. The memory of yesterday was too fresh, too vivid, and the curiosity of what could have happened if I didn't stop myself this time was too tempting. It was late. By the time finally made up my mind, the house was dark and quiet, and I could hear the faint sound of Max's breathing through the thin walls. My heart raced as I approached his room, Mibar's feet gliding quietly over the hardwood floor. As I pushed the door, a jarmy gaze fell upon him, sprawled on his side, his back turned toward me. He looked at peaceful, his breathing slow and steady in the soft glow of the nightlight for Amamont. I just stood there watching him, trying to decide if I was really going to go through with this, but then I found myself moving, my feet carrying me to his bed. Before I could talk myself out of Edie, slid in beside him, careful not to wake him at first. The mattress creaked softly beneath me, and the gentle heat of his presence enveloped me, a comforting reminder of our closeness. Initially, I simply reclined, attuned to the rhythm of his breath, sensing the gentle rise and fall of his chest. Yet as time stretched on, found my own breath growing increasingly rapid. I found myself compelled to extend my hand, fingertips brushing against his arm gently, as if to gauge the atmosphere between us. It wasn't long before he stirred, his breathing changing as he started to acute. Turned onto his back, eyes fluttering open in bewilderment as he recognized my presence. I could see the surprise in his expression, the way his eyes widened as he took in the situation, denied him the opportunity to voice his inquiries or objections. I extended my hand, leading his to my leg just as I had done the previous day. He paused briefly, his muscles tightening beneath my fingers, but then he relaxed, letting me lead. The ensuing moments unfolded in a haze. My senses honed in on everything around me. The warmth of his hand, the way his fingers moved tentatively at first, then with more confidence. As he got comfortable, my heart raced, my skin tingled, and I felt completely lost in the moment. There was a vulnerability to it, a rawness that made everything feel so real. It wasn't perfect or polished, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the connection. The way we seemed to understand each other without words. The way Our bodies moved together in this unspoken rhythm. Even though the situation was completely new, there was something natural about it. Something that felt right in a way I couldn't explain. It was like we'd crossed some invisible line, and there was no going back now without even thinking. I shifted toward him, closing the space between us in what felt like slow motion. My hand instinctively reached for his shoulder, and before he had the chance to react, a moment of connection passed between Yushivi with unspoken emotions, and I pulled back, unsure of what to say next. It was not marked by uncertainty or doubt. Rather, it was audacious, brimming with the intensity that had been simmering between us. I nudged him softly yet decisively, my hands resting on his shoulders, as I guided him back until he reclined beneath me. I sensed the subtle change in his body as he settled into the mattress, his hands naturally seeking out my waist. I positioned myself atop him, straddling his hips, and the sensation of being there elevated above him with every inch of our bodies. So intimately close was nearly overwhelming. The kiss deepened, evolving into a slower, more intentional embrace. I sensed his hands grip my waist a bit more firmly, as an indication of his effort to steady himself, as if the weight of the moment was nearly overwhelming. My hands moved up to his face, framing it as my thumbs brushed against the scruff on his jawline. His skin was warm, and the texture of his stubble against my fingertips made my stomach flutter. I tilted my head, adjusting the angle of kiss, and his lips parted slightly. That small motion sent a shiver down my spine, and I leaned into him more, letting the weight of my body press against his. He was fully taking over, setting the pace, controlling the rhythm, and it felt so good to let myself have that power, that control. There was something incredibly about being on top of him, feeling his heartbeat against me. His hands held me like he didn't want me toast up. Dopa breathing grew heavier, syncing with the movement of our lips occasionally. I would draw back just enough to observe him, his eyes half closed, his lips a touch swollen from orcus, his chest rising and falling as if he struggled to regain his breath. It was one of the most exquisite sights I'd ever encountered, and in those fleeting moments when he gazed at me, as if I were the sole treasure in existence, my heart swelled with an overwhelming intense. I bent closer once more, brushing my lips against his jawline, a tracing the curve of his cheek, lingering at the corner of his mouth before returning to his lips. Every kiss held its own unique essence. Some were swift and playful, while others unfolded slowly, as if we were relishing the bond between us. His hands began to wander, gliding up me, back, and then down to my thighs, but there was no urgency or aggression in his touch. It felt as though he was allowing me to take the lead, placing his trust in me to establish the rhythm, which only intensified my desire for him. Perched above him, I felt an undeniable sense of belonging, as if this moment was precisely where fate intended me to be. The way his body responded to mine captivated me, the subtle movements beneath me suggesting a desire to bridge the already narrow gap between us. Experienced a profound sense of strength intertwined with vulnerability, a delicate balance of being in command while remaining entirely receptive to him. If only he understood, if only he understood the depths of my desire for this. For how long I had contemplated being atop him, possessing him beneath me, ultimately allowing all that had been brewing between us to erupt. The way his hands clasped my waist, the intensity of his gaze, utterly vulnerable, ignited an even deeper desire within me. It transcended mere attention or attraction. It was the deep yearning to bridge the distance between us, to dismantle in every barrier that had previously kept us apart. Yet just as the temperature began to rise, reality crashed down upon us with the force of a brick wall. As he bent closer and pressed my lips to his once more, me thoughts surged forward. This was the moment, the culmination of everything that had led to this point. I yearned to delve deeper, to transcend the boundaries of mere kissing, and touching my body thumbed with longing, and his reacted to each subtle shift I made. A sensation washed over me. I was acutely aware of his presence in that moment, E took a brief pause, my voice low yet intentional, and inquired, "Do you have anything?" The expression on his face truly remarkable. Initially, there was a swirl of confusion as if he struggled to grasp my meaning, soon giving way to a gradual awakening of understanding. "Dothan," he gave me. The sheepish smile, his cheeks turning the faintest shade of Rita. "No, I don't. I didn't think." I couldn't believe it. 18 years old, had a girlfriend. And no condoms in his room. I just stared at him for a second, half in disbelief, half in exasperation. "Come on, how do you not have anything?" I let out a frustrated laugh, shaking my head, and he tried to defend himself, muttering something about how he didn't expect this to happen tonight. It possessed a charm that was utterly exasperating. "Really, Max?" I remarked, a chuckle escaping my lips. "Thou, reamurly. To keep the atmosphere alive, what sort of boyfriend is caught without protection at the ready?" He Marilou shrugged, an expression of utter helplessness crossing his features, tinged with a hint of apology. "I suppose seem not as ready as I believed," he murmured, his voice tinged with anxiety. Sighed, my head falling against his chest for a moment as I tried to figure out what to do next. The thing was, I didn't want to stop. I couldn't stop. I wanted him to much end. So decided to shift gears if he wasn't ready. Fine, I'd make sure Hestel remembered this night for the rest of his life. I slid down a little, my body trailing against his as I moved from his hips to his thighs, the way his breath hitched as I adjusted myself gave me a spark of confidence. His hands, which had been resting on my waist, moved slight linsure of what to do now that I was changing the dynamic as I nestled between his legs. I gazed up at him, my fingers lightly grazing his knees before gliding up the contours of his thishes. Whole body tightened as if he were preparing to withstand whatever lay ahead. His breath hitched once more, and eisensed his struggle to maintain composure, yet his body was revealing the truth of his turmoil. Etched delicate each subtle movement I executed elicited responses from him that helically remained unaware of his fingers entwined with the bedsheets, his thighs tensed subtly beneath my touch. His chest heaved and subsided with a rhythm both profound and erratic. I couldn't help but smile as I kissed him again, lower this time, feeling the tension in his body build with every move. I made his body was so responsive, and I loved it. I loved knowing that I could do this to him, that I could pull these reactions out of him just by being close, just by touching him in the right way. I grinned at that, pressing another kiss to his stomach before letting my hands wander a little more. His body was warm under my touch. Every movement seemed to send another shiver through him. It was intoxicating. Watching him come undone like this, knowing I was the one making it happen as I kept going. I could feel him relax more and more, his body melting into the mattress as he released the tension that had gripped him. He began to flow in harmony with my movements. At first, it was a mere suggestion, his hips moving with a gentle sway. His hands eventually returning to my shoulders as if seeking a tether to ground him. The rhythm of his breath, the soft murmurs escaping his lips, only ignited my resolve. Even more, I adored his sensitivity, how each small action of mine seemed to magnify his response. His beauty seemed to communicate with me, leading me in a quiet, instinctual manner, and oh, how I relished it. I found it Tobe even more enjoyable than I had anticipated. The awareness of his enjoyment, the realization that he was entirely at my mercy, heightened the experience. Even further, at one moment, Hera released a low, nearly imperceptible groan, and it caused a wave of heat directly through me. I took a moment to gaze at him once more, his head tilted back, lips gently parted, eyes shut as he surrendered to the experience. He appeared striking, utterly exposed and unraveling. It only made me want to keep going. The calm down when it was over. I felt this strange mix of emotions. The adrenaline had worn off, but the buzz in my chest was still there. I slowly stood up from the bed, feeling the weight off situation sink in. I didn't know what to think. A fragment of my being remained ensnared in the overwhelming intensity of it all, in the vividness of life that had surged through me in that instant. It felt as though I was adrift in a bubble where the outside world held no significance, yet as I stood there in this stillness, uncertainty began to creep in. I stole a look at him, still sprawled out, his chest gently rising and falling as he regained his breath. His eyes were shut, yet he appeared serene, satisfied. Osif. He had just undergone an experience so profound that it altered the very atmosphere surrounding us. His body resonated with a lingering energy unmistakable to me. I cleared my throat ring to shake off the tension dots, so I said, trying to sound casual, "Even though my mind was racing, you're not a virgin, right?" He opened his eyes at the question, looking up at me with a mix of confusion and curiosity. For a split second, I could see the shift in his expression. Like he wasn't sure if he should laugh it off or be serious yet. In that moment, he nodded with unwavering certainty. "No," he said quietly, his voice gentle yet unwavering. I arched an eyebrow, scrutinizing him intently. A small wave of disbelief washed over me. I found myself at a loss for words to explain it. I found myself grappling with the events that had just unfolded. Now this new twist emerged. It felt as though I had anticipated him to embody a different persona altogether. Burden of it. I refrained from saying anything further. With a deliberate turn, he exited the room, me pace measured as I sought to collect my scattered thoughts. He sensed his movements behind my it. I refrained from turning around as I strolled through the corridor. The gravity of the recent events began to settle upon me. My body thrummed with vitality, a lingering echo of the experience, yet my mind spiraled in a tempest of guilt and uncertainty. I just done it. Felt as though I had traversed an invisible line, a boundary I had been blissfully unaware of until that moment. The thrill, the joy, bonded had all seemed so perfect in that instant, yet now a nauseating sensation took root in my gut. It seemed amiss, yet undeniably perfect in waistsuit. Eluded my understanding. It felt as though my body had seized control as I free part of me yearned to plunge into that moment and release all thoughts of the aftermath, yet with the fervor of firmament behind me, I found myself unable to cease the relentless replay of it. In my thoughts, the intensity of his gazette, the electric response of his body to my own, the unwavering confidence with which chose to follow my lead, the intensity of it all perhaps was what rendered the experience so remarkable, so distinct from anything I had ever known. With another soul, I had never experienced a unique energy. With any other guise, it possessed a certain rawness, visceral quality, leaving me uncertain of its moral standing. I pressed my back against the cool wall of the hallway, shutting my eyes tightly as I sought to navigate the surge of tension coursing through me. The guilt was eating at me, but the rest often felt alive. I couldn't deny that part of me wanted to feel that again as he stood there. I realized I needed some perspective. I needed to talk it through, though. Ask myself if what I'd done was okay. Was it really wrong? Should I feel worse for it? I was unaware at last. I made my way back to the room, my heart pounding, grappling with a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Yet one certainty lingered in my mind: tonight would rematch in my memory. Regardless of my choices or the emotions that ultimately serve, it was destined to remain with me. In that moment, I found myself wondering the question, is this truly the right course of action? I was truly eager to find out. Surely I couldn't. Beatty, only one who had experienced this feeling, could. I posed the question, yearning for a glimmer of understanding from anyone who might offer insight. Thanks for listening.